few chapters I've actually forgotten about. I may read a few more in one go. To his surprise, when he opened his eyes, he was on dry land, and Dan was nowhere in sight. It took Jack a while to get his bearings, and when he did, he dusted himself down and looked around. All that he could see was lush green fields spread out into the distance, and he could make out a group of trees. At the very end, he decided to head towards them. They were about a mile away, and he was glad that the ground wasn't muddy, as he was beginning to feel tired with all of his adventures. Jack could hear a sound in the distance, and he wasn't sure what it was. Then he saw a shape in the distance. It was difficult to see with the sun in his eyes. The shapes began to move, and he realized that they were cows, and they were daydreaming in the sun and occasionally munching on the grass. They looked very lazy, thought Jack with a smile. He wasn't worried at all. He headed for the trees. He was sure that they would lead somewhere. He was lost in his thoughts when he heard a sound like thunder. He looked to the blue sky, but he should have been keeping his eyes on the cows. They were charging towards him, sending a cloud of mud into the air. He turned to see the steam snorting out of their nostrils and spittle dripping out of their chins like lard. He began to panic. They looked like bloody dinosaurs, he thought. He began running across the fields, and he was very careful not to trip. The last thing he wanted was to be trampled and left like sawdust. Jack could hear their heavy breathing behind him and the thunderous pounding of their hoofs. He could see the fence in the distance. It was his only hope, and he headed for it as fast as his tired legs could run. He'd heard about people being trampled by cows. He'd never thought it would ever happen to him. He felt something nipping at his trousers, and he flung himself at the fence and scrambled over it in panic. Unfortunately, the fence was a thorn bush, and he felt the thorns cutting into his skin. But he didn't care. He just climbed higher and higher. And when he looked down, he could see the cows stamping their feet madly as if in disapproval. He rested for 5 minutes, and he was bathed in sweat. He felt the pounding of his heart, like it would burst out of his chest. Next page. Right then. Eventually, he jumped over to the other side and thanked his lucky stars. He decided to follow the winding path to see where it led. After 100 yards, he came across an old bench with a red bicycle laying next to it. It didn't appear to belong to anyone, so after a 5-minute rest and reprieve for the owner to return, Jack hopped on and sped off down the lane. I'll stop now because it's hard to do it on the phone. I'll do another one in a minute. Hope you enjoyed that. Please sub me. And that bit was a true story which happened to me when I was nearly killed by cows.